Thank you very much. Great. Yeah, thank you for the warm welcome. First of all, I have to admit that I'm really glad that we are, from the GrandMA 3 software perspective, a little bit beyond version 1.5. So it's good that we have this event here for 1.5, but I'm glad that we are now at version 1.9. And what I would like to do with you today as a kind of introduction for this event tonight is to have a look at some concepts, some functionalities of GrandMA 3, explain some things, why we are doing some things like we do them in GrandMA 3. But first of all, I'm really glad to be here, and please give a warm hand to the team of SDG for this beautiful atmosphere here. That is wonderful, really wonderful. Thank you very much. So, yeah. As I mentioned, what I want to do with you is a little bit to have a look at GrandMA 3 concepts, functionalities. We will afterwards have some time at the consoles to answer questions, to go through some detailed things in the software regarding phasers, recipes, all the stuff we need, right? And we love in GrandMA 3. So I have a short summary of the slides I prepared for tonight. So after 6.5 hours, I think we are more or less done. And you know everything about the GrandMA 3 concepts. Just a joke. So it is more or less 30 minutes we're going to need here for this small introduction talk. And we will talk about a little bit improved programming workflows, a little bit about overview and visibility in the software. So there are some aspects I would like to share with you what we are doing. What we did in the last couple of software versions, what is the actual status of some things. Data handling, sounds boring, but we need it. I just want to give you also some insights of the development, some insights of our thoughts, what we have release per release. Why do we have to take care of some aspects, especially of data handling? Then I have a kind of special situation because obviously I'm working as brand and product manager for MA, but I'm not a lighting programmer and not a lighting designer, and thank God it is like that. But I will do some live programming here. I have two very nice examples of this year's Eurovision Song Contest, so a very big television production, which was completely running on GrandMA 3. And you could see, we are very happy that you could see in a lot of looks, a lot of effects that were running on this show. They used exactly some ideas which are provided now with GrandMA 3, so some really original GrandMA 3 workflows. And I just want to show you how we can get to some results in a fast and easy way using these GrandMA 3 tools. And afterwards, there will be definitely some time for you on the consoles to replicate this and ask questions about this. Then I will talk a little bit about the MA fundamentals, so some things we have to make sure for each and every single software version. I want to give you a kind of roadmap on what we are working per today regarding the next software versions, especially 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, so the next iterations of software development we are doing. I give you some insights of what we are planning, of what we want to do, what we like to do in the software. And then, of course, at the end, you might have questions as well, and we will definitely answer them. So everything is based on GrandMA 3 software 1.9 you will find on the consoles. So the actual release we have. You might have recognized that we have a bug fix version since last week. So we fixed a lot of things in, let's say, the area of queue stacks, in the area of phases, but especially also in move-in black things, tracking. There are a lot of things fixed. So please, as always, have a look at the release notes and have a look at this new bug fix version. We can talk about some details later on as well. Great. So first of all, let's say about the three main topics we always have in our software releases. The most important one for us is always programming workflow. So to improve the workflow, to make the workflow faster, to add some functionalities which are simple and easy, and which make your life as the programmers and operators a little bit easier when you work with our products. So what we did in 1.9 is, for example, I just want to give you some short examples. There was a big request that we can create our phasers, right? Our phasers as presets. That is nice because we have the attributes directly in our presets. It's the same workflow as we would do with some static values. So that was the original idea of phasers. We just want to use the same workflow. no matter if we program some dynamic stuff or we program some static stuff. And that's what we can do with phasers. But the problem was so far that we weren't able to connect some speed settings directly to these objects. Speed settings directly to our presets, which are the phasers. So like using the same speedmaster for all the dimmer phasers we have, or the same speedmaster for all the position phasers we have. What we can do now is, if we have a look at a short example and we create a nice effect, you can use, you can use the MAtrix therefore to adjust these things. Let's say we have a 360 phase and we have wings of 2. That looks wonderful. Now, what I can do is I can go to my encoder bar. And in the encoder bar, I have a new layer, which is called Speedmaster. And with this Speedmaster, I can directly now connect the Speedmaster with my preset object. And the Speedmaster, in this case, when we go to our dimmer feature group, you can see here, these are my Speedmasters which are available. So if I store now a Speedmaster number 10, for example, with this preset, so with this phaser, I will make sure that this reference exists anywhere I use this preset now. So later on when I use it from the programmer, it will be Speedmaster number 10 that I use to control this preset, or it will be Speedmaster number 10 to control it when I use it in a queue in several sequences. So we have always this reference to this Speedmaster. That is quite nice. What we do as well in terms of programming workflow is not only, let's say, this was more a kind of concert touring festival thing that we need, especially for busking shows, this is relevant, but as a hybrid system, what we try to provide with GrandMA 3, we also take care of theater television workflow. And especially when we think of tracking lists, of queue stacks we build, we have some functionalities added in tracking, and I just want to give you one example for a very powerful functionality we have now in our sequence, which is called break. Most of you who worked with GrandMA 2 maybe already, you know what a break is. We do a break in a queue, and we make sure that all the changes we make before the break doesn't affect the queue afterwards, right? So that is the original functionality of a break. And in GrandMA 2, so far, this was possible for all the fixtures and all the attributes at once. So we set a break for everything in this queue. Now in GrandMA 3, we go a step further, and we have these breaks based on filters or worlds. So you can select filters or worlds directly here. So that means you have an attribute-dependent break. So you could say, I want to track my dimmer through, but I want to have several breaks for my position, color, and gobo, for example. So to separate your different scenes in a theater play or something like this. Or even a step further, you would choose a world. A world can be attributes plus specific fixtures. So imagine a situation again in your theater where you have your house lights and you want to track your house lights through, especially with the dimmer. You set some things at the beginning, and if you change it, it should track through the list. But for the stage lights or for the audience lights or whatever, you want to make some breaks in between your play, and you could separate it by these specific worlds. So this functionality is quite powerful. As I said, we can have a look later at the consoles to go a little bit more into detail. But if you have questions in between, just shout at me, right? If I talk too slow, too fast, if it's completely boring, just shout at me, right? Wonderful. The next thing, what is always kind of important for us next to the programming workflow, is to keep overview and visibility. You know, we have to deal with so much data, with more and more complex fixtures, with more and more complex looks and cues we have to create. So we have to find ways how to handle this data, how to make it available for us in a fast and easy way. That's the thing what we try to do in each and every software release. And one of the big requests we fulfilled now with 1.9 is definitely that we have the possibility to give some information to our objects. The first request was, I have a queue list, and for each and every single queue, I want to put in some notes. I want to have this info column from GrandMA 2, right? We have this now with version 1.9. If we scroll a little bit further in our sequence sheet, you will see that we have a new node column here. So the node column gives us the possibility to give some nodes, what should happen in the queue, what is the next command I have to take care of. I can type it in here. The good thing about the nodes is that it's not only available for queues, but it's available everywhere. You can put nodes to presets, you can put nodes to groups, you can put nodes to your speedmasters to describe what they are doing. Or even if we have a look at whatever, DMX protocols, our ArtNet lines. You see right here, you can put a node in there as well. So this is maybe guest console number 1, streaming ACN line number 1 is guest console number 2, whatever, and you can put a node there, right? So you can describe the things you set up in your show file, and you can easily, find the way through it afterwards. Good. And regarding overview and visibility, I don't know if you have realized this, we have a new way of defining our title bars in sheets. So which functionalities do I want to have in direct access in my different sheets, in a sequence sheet, for example, right? You can see here some buttons which are available in the title bar to show the steps, to show the track sheet, to show the settings, whatever. And there is a new workflow which is quite nice. When we edit the sheet settings and we go into this edit title bar mode, we can easily select now which buttons we want to see in this title bar. So I get rid of everything here, for example, and I only want to see fixture sort and feature sort. These are the two functionalities I need, and then I just close it and it's done. So I don't have to build some defaults or some sets. I can store it as a default, but it's just a simple and easy workflow to build these title bars, right? Good, wonderful. Overview and visibility. Data handling. Data handling is always a big thing because it refers to our system approach. One of the strengths or one of the strong points of MA is that we always take care that data is in real time, that our DMX outputs are synchronous, and that we handle the parameters all over the system, no matter if it's just one console or 5 consoles, 10 consoles, plus additional processing units and nodes. So it should always work the same, and therefore data handling is always quite a big topic. Not a big topic which a user can see in the software directly because we have no new buttons or colors or whatever in our sheets, but it's always somehow happening in the background. And that's why I want to give you some insight in a specific functionality or a specific thing we did now with 1.9, which also explains why we in GrandMA 3 had to go to a complete new system architecture compared to GrandMA 2. So there were always some voices like, you could have just further developed GrandMA 2. So just take some GrandMA 2 stuff, copy it, paste it in the editor, whatever you do in this source code land, and then go on with that. But that would have set us exactly the same limitations like we had in the GrandMA 2 system. And that's what we wanted to overcome at some point. And one example for this, I just want to show you. It's a little bit technical, but maybe you get an idea of what we are dealing with in each and every single software release cycle. So a preset object. A preset object can be quite simple. And in GrandMA 2 times, it was quite simple, right? We had a preset which consisted of values and a selection. So somehow, no matter if you have a selective, global, universal preset, somehow you have a selection in that preset. And of course, a value, which is nice. In GrandMA 3, this preset object can be much more complex because we wanted to add functionality. Because a preset in GrandMA 3 means it cannot be only static, it can be dynamic as well. We have our phasers. And what we know as well is that the complexity of fixtures increases day by day, nearly. That means our selection can have a lot of multi-instances. Multi-instances is always additional data which is collected in our presets, of course. We have to have the data for the multi-instances. We have to have the data for the main instance. It just increases the complexity. What else do we have? In GrandMA 3, we can have reference to timing. So imagine what you can do in GrandMA 3 preset. You can store individual fade, individual delay timing directly with your preset. So you can easily create a dynamic thing which is also referenced in your sequences. This was not possible in GrandMA 2. And therefore, we had to change the system architecture. But on the other hand, of course, that adds a little bit complexity to our preset object. Makes sense. The other thing we can do in GrandMA3, especially helpful for our phasers, we can store a matrix directly in there, right? So we can have our wings of 2 and phase of 360 degrees. We can store it directly with our preset. Makes sense if we want to create some phaser objects, right? Which we did in the first example, right? So also this is a nice functionality we added to the preset, but adds complexity on the other hand. And another thing we will talk later a little bit more about is the recipes. So a preset can contain several recipe lines, which are a tool to create values and which are able to remember what we did once. So if some ingredients of this recipe changes, like a fixture selection, like the fixture setup in general, we can easily convert these objects to the new situation. But also this, with a preset, with a selection, with a matrix in this recipe, can create more complexity for a preset object. So the simple comparison between a preset object in GrandMA2 and in GrandMA3 can mean we have a preset with values or selection as a simple object up to a preset which can have, this complexity level, right? And especially if you now do a simple operation like store and update these objects, of course you have to take care that all of these different references are updated properly. So that is more complexity to a simple store and update functionality than we've ever had. For us, that means just in the development, and that's why I stress this topic of data handling a little bit, that we have to take care in the background that this operation is as fast as updating a preset with just a selection and values. So we want to make sure that all of these references are updated in the same speed, that you don't have to wait for your red preset until it's updated after 1 minute. That's not what we want to have, of course, right? So these are some things just to give you some insights in the development process of things, of implementations which happen in the background, right? Which the user cannot see, but this is just happening that your workflow is not slowed down. Okay. And then data handling is definitely also a little bit about, let's say, network protocols, DMX protocols. We want to make sure that our session handling works. We want to make sure that our DMX output is synchronous and in real time. All of these things we always try to replicate or to try to ensure with each and every single software release. And this takes time. Development time, which is around 40 to 50% of the development. This is just something that I'd like to explain you. Wonderful. Live programming with GrandMA3 concepts. Now it's getting interesting because, as I told you, I'm not a programmer, but I just want to show you some things which can be easily done with new GrandMA3 workflows, which helped us, helped the guys, especially programming this Eurovision Song Contest. And I just brought some videos, and this was more or less, let's say, the basic look of the Eurovision Song Contest. And the first thing we realized, and which is can be quite a challenge to program this, is that the basic look in this case contains 3 colors. So you have some standard basic looks which may contain 2 colors, but 3 colors adds another complexity to your programming, especially when you want to have effects running phases with that. So a basic look with 3 colors can be a challenge. Obviously, exactly if you have this running effect here, you can see that you need at least 3-4 steps to program this effect. So remember what it means programming this in GrandMA2, where you have just a high and a low value. So just 2 values for your effect. I could have 2 colors. In GrandMA3, it helps us that we have this step concept where we can have 3, 4, 5, 6 steps which we can use for our phases. And I just want to show you how these guys programmed this effect, because it's quite simple. Remember, in GrandMA2, we would have to have some color forms. You would have multiple effect lines to program this. In GrandMA 3, we do it a little bit easier. So what we do now is I have some setup which looks nearly the same as this one. So we just go on with a few fixtures. And you can see that I have my focus. Maybe we bring down the zoom a little bit. Too small, which is great. And we need the iris to go down a little bit. Yeah, looks nice, wonderful. So now I can start to build my phaser, and I just take some steps of my color presets, right? I just use, we remember the first step was orange. We remember the second step was maybe a kind of magenta, and then the third step was maybe a blue. And we had a fourth step because you could see that at some point the lights went off, right? So we have a fourth step where we set the dimmer to 0. Wonderful. And as soon as we do this, this is running, but it looks not like what I want to have. Now a second thing helps us, which is especially a concept in GrandMA 3 from the very first beginning, which is the selection grid. The selection grid as a more dimensional approach to have my fixture selection. In this case, you could see in the video that we had a phase from the top to the bottom. So not standard from the left to the right, but it was from top to bottom. And this is something I can easily do with the MAtrix because my MAtrix are not only available in X direction, but also in Y direction, right? So I go to my phase, and let's say we have a 180 phase. And this looks a little bit more like what I want to have. I could now go and play around with my steps, of course. I could use the fourth step to go in there to make it a little bit wider because we could see the lights were a little bit more off than on. So I could do this easily. I can go in there and increase the percentage to 300, for example. I could slow down the transition a little bit because you could see a snap when the lights turned off. And then suddenly I'm at this, what I programmed with my Eurovision lights with the arcs as well. So quite a simple workflow where we just need the onboard tools, like programming some steps one after the other, and it's done. I can use it as a preset, and it's fine, right? So this was the first thing the guys used very extensively, especially phasers, the steps, of course, to recreate, especially with this basic look of 3 colors, using it for their different effects, because otherwise it would have been much more complex to do that, right? I want to show you a second situation. We don't have a look at this beautiful singer now. For us, important is the background. The background of the stage where you can see some, I think it was tetra bars, so these LED bars which can turn around and do some crazy stuff, right? And single pixel control. So in the video, we will see that there is soon a kind of circle they programmed with these LED, with these LED bars in the background. Everything which happened on the tetra bars, by the way, was programmed with the selection grid. So there was no media server or something. It was just the selection grid. You can see this, right? So the circle which is coming from the outside to the inside, or the other way around, from the inside to the outside, they had the same. So that was no media content, no bitmap engine, nothing. It was just phasers used with the selection grid. And I want to show you how they did it. I have literally the same matrix in the background. So what I have is we have this kind of these ones. You can see them in the background here. And I press down to go and have my single pixels, right? So with the 3D camera perspective, I think you know this tool because this was one of the new things in version 1.9. With this tool in 3D, you can easily map the single pixels, depending on the camera, to your selection grid. And once you have done this, it is very easy to program some things. So I could go with a snap-on dimmer effect. Maybe we reduce the intensity to 50, then it's a little bit not so shiny, wonderful. And then I can use the MAtrix again, right? So I make use of 360, for example. I make use of 2 wings. And you see that I can easily create some things on my LED background with the multi-instances. So it's quite simple to do this with just the steps and with the phaser engine we have already. Okay, how we do get the circle? This is something where we can make use of some tools we have as well. Maybe you know the align bar. And the align bar gives us, next to the align modes we know, gives us some more functionalities like slowing down or speeding up this align process. So what they did here is to use this align mode, which is coming from the inside to the outside, and then they put it to slow. You can not read it because it's not wide enough, but this is slow and this is fast, so 2 functionalities in here. And then they gave a phase with 360. I do it in the phaser editor because the advantage here is that it's done in X and Y direction at the same time. So I want to have this circle, and for the circle, I need X and Y phase. Makes sense. So in this case, what you can see is we can easily recreate this circle. So no bitmap engine, no content. It's just the steps and some functionalities on the selection grid. Now the next thing is you could see that these bars were panning around. So they were not always linear. So like this situation, which is quite easy, but they were panning around somehow, right? We do this as well. So we go up again, and yeah, I'm using a little bit this, this align mode maybe, and pan these things around. Let's see. I will zoom in here so you can see what happened. So now you can see they are not linear anymore, but some of them are hanging like this, so it's very asymmetrical what happens here, right? So how do I get the multi-pixels now in my selection grid to get the circle repaired, right? It's exactly the same tool again. So we just use, our front camera, which is this, and we would just simply use the tool in our 3D. When we go down to our single pixel level, we have all of them selected. You see at the moment it's kind of 3D selection grid, which makes no sense for us. But if we use this tool, you can see they are automatically aligned in this selection grid, right? I will show you a little bit more on full screen what happens. Before that, I will just apply the phase again, and you can see our circle is repaired, right? So, and it goes via the pixels no matter how these bars are hanging or something like this. So at the end, how the selection grid looks like. Let's have a look at this in full screen. Like this. You can see each and every single pixel is aligned as the camera perspective would show us. So this is quite powerful because with this tool, you can easily make a complete snapshot of your stage and use the matrix in your selection grid. That's exactly what the guys did. Right. Question?
So, does it work the same way with circle pictures, like a branch?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It just depends on your actual fixture selection and on the camera perspective. That's everything you need. So no matter which fixture type you have, or yeah, that's the thing. Cool. I'm glad that it worked. As I said, I'm not a programmer. Great. Wonderful. Okay. Good, we saw that. What you could see is now some easy functionalities the guys made use of, and yeah, some simple things to achieve some quite cool looks here and there. Another concept which is there in GrandMA 3 and which is kind of fundamental for us is was also heavily used by them because they were programming from the beginning onwards, and it would be clear that it was 3 months of preparation, and they would not know how the fixture setup changes, and maybe they will get new fixtures. They will have to remove some fixtures, so that was not very clear from the beginning. It's always like that at Eurovision Song Contest, to be honest. Sometimes they just come and they remove some fixtures and they bring a new floor set, nice, and everything has to work together, right? So one concept in GrandMA3 which helps us are definitely the recipes. And the recipes are, let's say, a way, I mean, it can look like this. This is me in the kitchen, more or less, right? So if I try to cook something, and I have my ingredients and try to cook something which is nice, it works most of the time, just one time. But then I try to recook it, and I try to remember which ingredients I used, and I end up like this because it doesn't taste the same. For me, it's quite fine because during the week, I only have to cook the same thing day by day, and it will be a completely different meal. That is fine. But for a lighting show, of course, this is some different story. We want to change some fixture setup, we want to change some ingredients, but the show should look exactly the same. And this is what recipes do for us. So the recipes contain all the different things we need to create a look, to create our show, and we are able to remember them. Remember them in terms of we know which fixture selection we use, or we know which color preset or matrix we use. It's all in the recipes. And once the fixture setup, or let's say the matrix changes, the recipes would take care that everything will be adapted automatically. So imagine a cue stack where you use a lot of individual timing, a lot of phases, 360 degrees, 180 degrees, and you just add 5 more fixtures to your truss, or you add some more trusses, you add a floor set. You would normally have to go into your cue list and bring the fixtures manually in this 360-degree thing, in this individual timing from the left to the right. If you do change the group in a recipe and you add the fixture to this group, the recipes will take care that you don't have to do it manually. So that's the biggest intent, or that's the intention and the biggest approach of recipes and the biggest advantage. So it's useful, of course, in touring shows where you know that from time to time the fixture setup changes. You go to a different festival and you have 3 trusses instead of 4, or you have some wash fixtures instead of some spots, or whatever happens. And in general, anywhere where changes are expected, these recipes help us. We can have a look later if I think you probably have questions about recipes and you experienced some of these functionalities already, but we will have a look at this in detail. A recipe itself, as I mentioned, it can contain everything we need for a look, like a selection, a preset, a matrix. Everything together can be stored into a recipe. And then we use this recipe mainly in cues, because then we can recreate our cues automatically, right? In our sequence with the individual timings, we want to recreate this. And therefore, on the other hand, it's very important that on the one hand, we can store values directly in a queue, like we used to create a queue. But we can use recipes as a kind of different tool to create these values, to remember them. And therefore, we need the cook functionality, right? So this is the difference between store and cook. At the end, the good thing is that all these options we know from the store functionality, like override, merge, remove, they are there for the cook functionality, so when we deal with recipes as well. Why is this the case? Of course, we want to make sure that once we created a sequence which is completely based on recipes, we remember everything is set up very nicely, but then there is this special situation in our show where we have an additional speaker, and we have to grab some fixtures and put it to the speaker, whatever. Of course, we have to make sure that some lights at some point should not follow this recipe, but do some individual stuff, right? So therefore, it's important that we have this parallel functionality of not only cooking some recipes, but also manually storing some values. And that's also the reason why manual stored values have always a higher priority than the cooked values from a recipe, right? And some things like store remove help us later, and this is maybe the second very powerful thing of recipes. They help us to get rid of these individual values later on and go back to the original intention. So to the original thing we programmed with the recipes, right? That is the approach of, let's say, recipes in general. And all these functionalities I talked about are based on our MA fundamentals. The MA fundamentals are a little bit about our system approach, about our network approach. It's about stability and reliable backup scenarios. So we want to make sure that when we work in a network session with several stations, different consoles, processing units, if one console fails for whatever reason, it doesn't happen too often, but when it happens, then we want to make sure that there is another console who can take over this, right? We want to have parameter calculation and scalability, so we want to be able to scale our system when it should get bigger. All of this calculation in the background is one of the fundamentals we have to ensure for each and every single software release. Exactly the same is true for the real-time and synchronous DMX output. As I told at the beginning, one console with a direct DMX connection to our stage should work exactly the same way as a bigger system with 10 consoles and 8 processing units, right? So that's the thing we always make sure in these development cycles. Of course, we want to use real multi-user environments because this is what makes MA maybe a little bit stronger than other brands, that we have real multi-user situations. We can work with user rights on our shows, work literally at the same object with different users. And of course, what is always the thing and which is more and more important in the GrandMA 3 system, we want to have multiple connections and interfaces. So there is no need to have additional modules for timecode or for MIDI incoming. It's all on board. And all of these connections which are there, they should be used to have some connections to third-party systems as well. When we have some incoming MIDI triggers or when we have some devices which can be controlled via OSC or something. So these are all the fundamentals which we have to make sure release by release. Just to give you some insights why we do some things and why we take a little bit of more care for some things which you might not see as new features, functionalities in the software. Hope that makes sense. Wonderful. 5 minutes, yeah, good. I'm exactly done in 5 minutes. Because now I just want to talk shortly about what we have on the list. This is something we plan for the next software iterations, right? It's not a list which will be completely done in version 2.0, but these are projects we have as a kind of priority for us in mind. First of all is customization. Customization, we started it already in several different places, but customization means, for example, customize our encoder bar, right? Why should we not have pan, tilt, zoom, focus on the first 4 encoders? That is something we are reaching, hopefully, in the next software release already. Customization is also customization of sheets. Sheets in terms of we want to move our columns, we want to make them bigger, smaller, we want to hide some columns. So just to make the console your own personal workspace. These are some things we are heading to in the next releases. Encoder bar, I talked already about this, customization a little bit, but not only this. The encoder bar is at the end the first place we have to deal with when we control fixtures, right? And therefore, to make use of all of this information we get with the different fixtures and the different fixture types, we have to reduce information somehow, and we have to make information of the fixture types, which get more and more complex, unfortunately. We have to make it usable somehow, right? So therefore, encoder bar is always, is always a very important topic for us. Selection grid, we will see some improvements in the selection grid in next version, especially when it's about, let's say you have a selection grid created somehow, and then you want to edit it later on. You want to grab some fixtures and move them somewhere else or something. So these are things we are heading to in the next software release as well. Maybe one of the most important or most mentioned things during the last couple of weeks and months and maybe years, special dialogues. We all know the request of Shaper special dialogues. This will be something for the next release. But the bigger idea behind special dialogues is that we want to have attribute-dependent special dialogues. So not only a color picker, not only a Shaper special dialogue, but a special dialogue for dimmer as well, for position. What about having a special dialogue for our complete beam? So everything which influences the beam, including Gobo, Iris, all of these different functionalities, why should we not have a nice graphical user interface for that, right? So this is the thing we are heading towards in the next releases. We for sure will have some time code improvements, not only in the workflow, but also in display things. Yeah, we will see what we have. And there are, of course, as always, just more projects like whatever we have on the list since the beginning, like a video engine, bitmap stuff, all of these things where we want to improve, which are definitely on the list for the next software releases. Good. I think that was 5 minutes. Do you have any questions for me at this point? Otherwise, we can have questions around later directly at the consoles. I think we are now heading towards food, right? So I'm between this situation and food, right? This is bad.
So guys, food's coming up next. I think we're going to open up the roll-up door. I'll be around, Daniel will be around, there's a couple of other guys that'll be around, and we're just going to kind of huddle and come over to each table, say hello, and talk and ask questions. If you've got any specific things, come find me. We'll get Daniel involved with talking real specifics. And thank you everybody for coming. Hopefully you learned a little bit, and we'll do some more.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for listening.